Welcome to the Afropolitan Podcast, hosted by Eche Emole, founder of Afropolitan. On the show, we chat with Afropolitans whose footprints form the foundation of systems dedicated to building the future of a bold and progressive Black community. In each episode, our guests share their working formulas, the hard facts about leaving familiar terrain, embracing the unknown, and staying relevant afterwards. Listen as we extract the blueprints of fearlessness, innovation, and progress.
Thank you. How's your weekend going so far?
It's going well. Resting up, getting ready for the week.
Awesome. So let's dive right into it, shall we?
Yep.
How was your 2020? How did 2020 go, especially regarding the pandemic, and what were you doing before the lockdown started?
Yeah, so let's see. At the start of the pandemic, I was here in San Francisco. Right, we had just announced. I think we had just announced our seed funding, and CloudTrucks was a team of 5 people just working out of a small office here in San Francisco, and in March when we had to go into we had to go into lockdown. We had a guest who visited. He was a little bit sick, and we didn't know if he had COVID. So we actually went into started working from home before a lot of people, and we thought we were just going to do that for 2 weeks. That was very early in March, and and a lot changed since then. But 2020 was okay. We weren't as hurt as many people. It was kind of like a weird year in many ways. I think each person has had a lot to deal with in general, and the company has been fine and it's grown, and we're thankful for that. We went from 5 to like 37 people during that time period, but had to deal with a lot of personal stuff, business stuff as well.
Definitely. So let's back up a little bit, and I wanted to give the listeners context for the interview. So we are talking to Tobenna Arodiogbu. Tobenna, did I pronounce your last name properly? Because I've heard a lot of these other hosts murder it. I think the last one, the other podcast, I was like, wait, there was no I in front of the... And I'm like, so I said to myself, like, Eche, you're Igbo, you can't mispronounce his name. Like, this is on you to bring this back. Did I get it right? Did I get it?
No, not exactly. I'll hold you to higher standards. So if I was pronouncing it, it would be Arodiogbu.
Arodiogbu. Okay. I didn't know what the guy said. He had practiced it, and I'm like, yo, I cannot do it. But Tobenna, let's talk about your journey to the U.S. Can you give a little bit about your background, your family? How did you come to be in the U.S.? I know that you went to Penn State and then also John Hopkins, I believe. How was that transition?
Yeah, so a little bit of context. I went to I was born and raised in Enugu, so grew up in Enugu in the East. Went to federal government college Enugu, and
are you serious? That's why I was born in Enugu, and I went to that school too.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Wow.
All right. We might need to figure out years as we as we talk through it. Maybe we'll find out that we know a lot of people in common. But
definitely.
So I graduated from federal in 2006, and I'm the youngest of 4. All of my siblings had to the UK, and I really wanted to go to the US for college. I had a deal with my parents that I would stay back, work with them for a year, and then I'll be able to move. So,
what did your parents do?
Yeah. So at the time, in 2006, my dad started a soap factory, and so I worked from the very first day that soap came out through the conveyor belts, and I would pack soap into boxes, seal up the boxes. Moved out here for college. I went to college at Penn State. Penn State was the only school that I actually applied to. It was.
Wait, how did that work for college applications though? Because Nigerian parents usually say apply to more. So did you tell them you had applied to more?
No. So what happened was that my parents really, really, really did not want me to go to school in the U.S. Okay. We don't have a lot of family here. It's very far, and I definitely wasn't seen as the let's say I wasn't the best kid growing up, or at least that's not the way they viewed me. So they felt like sending me that far away was going to be a little bit dangerous. So I didn't get a lot of help. That's why Penn State was the only school that I completed the application to. I was also supposed to apply to University of Maryland, College Park. I didn't complete that application process. And then a few of the other application processes, like I kind of got stuck on, I remember Georgia Tech, you had to pay some fee, and they wouldn't accept a debit card. They would only accept a credit card, but my dad didn't have a credit card. So there were just all of these things that just kind of led to Penn State being the only school that I applied to. And I applied to Penn State because my mom's really close friend's son had gone there. So basically, like a family friend had gone to Penn State, and I applied and I got in. And I was supposed to study engineering. And 2 years in, I found that I had taken way more econ classes than engineering classes. And so I switched to an econ major, almost a double major in political science. I was very fascinated by political science stuff, but I took all the classes. I was 3 credits shy of a second major, and I figured I'm never going to use this major for anything. I was just taking the classes because I was interested. So I never got that double major.
I think you figured correctly, because I'm someone who got a political science degree and also got a master's in political science, and I'm not currently using it. So I think you figured, but it is good for interesting conversation and definitely research. But what was it about the US that appealed to you over the UK, though, especially with your siblings having gone to the UK?
Yeah, so I visited the UK as a kid, and I visited the US as a kid. I think there were really 2 main things. The first thing was that my fondest memories, when we traveled, were definitely formed in the US. So going to Disney World when I was a kid, right? Like you can't really top that. That was one of my fondest memories. And I was someone who had a lot of imagination. I always assumed that I could do anything. Which leads me to the second point. I felt like all of the really interesting people, really interesting innovation, young people doing interesting things seem to live in the US. Yep. The only person that I considered to be really interesting who was in the UK was Richard Branson, right? And so to me, it was just a very simple calculation. If all the people that I think are doing extremely interesting things in the world, in technology, in business, whatever else, are in the US, then clearly that's where I need to be, because there's something about that country that's unique. And that was really the drive for me at the time, and that's the reason I wanted to move out here.
Definitely. So then after you're done with school at Penn State, you transitioned to Johns Hopkins. What was the major there at Johns Hopkins?
Yeah, so I got a master's in finance at Hopkins, but it wasn't a linear story, actually. Mm-hmm. So I graduated at Penn State's econ major. Now I said the thing about political science major, mm-hmm. that there isn't that much you can do with it. I would say that an econ major is similar. Like I view econ and political science as things that teach you how to think in a way, right? Teach you how to think about the world and all of that. So, but when you do something that broad, you graduate and you don't know exactly what you want to do. I didn't want to like try to get a job on Wall Street or anything like that. Quite frankly, I also didn't even have the best grades. It's like if you ever look at my grades, you would see a bunch of A's in some subjects that were supposed to be like really, really difficult. And you would see like a bunch of C's in classes that were supposed to be really easy. And what that just shows is like my interest. So my grades can only tell you what my interests were, as opposed to anything else. It wouldn't tell you anything about difficulty or otherwise of any single course. So it's not like I could just walk into Goldman or anything like that. So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Graduated in 2011. Spent some time in the DC area. Took a few classes here and there, and I was working at a small company in DC. But then I was very interested in tech, and I figured, well, I studied econ. Clearly, my best path into the tech world would be to go work in venture capital. I didn't know how hard it was to get into venture. So this was in late 2012, early 2013. I started applying to a bunch of VC funds and cold reaching out to them and like, pestering them basically. And one of them just made the mistake of responding to my email. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is an in. I kept reaching out to the fund. They ended up like saying like, hey, we can hire you as an intern, but this is based in San Jose and you're in DC. I was like, oh no, I was actually planning on moving to San Jose, so I put my left the job I was working at, put my apartment on Airbnb in Bethesda, Maryland. Got an apartment on Airbnb in San Jose. So that worked out really well because one Airbnb was paying for the other. And I moved out. I moved out and I worked at that firm for 3 months. And that probably changed my trajectory significantly because it gave me the first real clarity of what I wanted to do. So I was an analyst. I was looking at all of these startups. And it was clear to me that I did not want to be a VC. In fact, not that I didn't want to be. I had no business being a VC. Like the way I looked at it was, who am I to say that one idea or one startup or whatever is good or better than the next one when I've never worked at any of these companies myself? I've never started any of these companies. And I kind of envied the people who were coming in every day because to me, those people were building the future. So I knew that I definitely wanted to work at a startup. I didn't know what roles to apply for. I had applied to Hopkins just before I left DC, and I got in on a scholarship, not a full scholarship, but a partial scholarship for a master's in finance program. And I decided, okay, I need to go back and regroup. And instead of taking a full-time position at this fund, I need to go back, regroup, and come back and work at a startup that I really want to work at. So that's what I did. End of summer 2013, the fund offered me a full-time position. I told them that I wouldn't take it. I moved back, went for the 1-year master's in finance program at Hopkins, and then started applying to a bunch of companies. There were two that I was really excited about. One of them was making like a text messaging, or not text messaging, like a messaging SDK for apps, right? So you didn't have to build a messaging stack yourself. And the other was Zenefits. And Zenefits was because I had seen Parker on TechCrunch Disrupt, in 2013, pitching the company. And I didn't understand a lot of the concepts. I just understood small businesses. So I was like, okay, that's right up my alley. I grew up around small businesses. HR compliance benefits software. I'm like, this is great. This is absolutely what I should do. And they had a role called product operations analyst or something like that, or maybe it was just more broadly product operations. And I applied to that. And I applied when the company was Series A. I flew out and interviewed, and then they gave me an offer, and I joined right after they closed their Series B. So I joined when it was like 100 or less than 100 people actually, and learned a lot while I was working at that company.
Okay, so let's talk about Scotty Labs first before we transition on to CloudTrucks. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay. So what problems were Scotty Labs looking to solve?
Yeah. So Scotty Labs had an interesting history because, I don't have a robotics background, right? But like I said earlier, I've always believed I can do anything. That mentality has definitely served me well over the years. So with Scotty, I gone from Zenefits to Open Door, and at Open Door, I had seen for the first time in my life, I had seen a tech company that wasn't afraid to own a lot of assets and really get their hands dirty in an industry. So what I mean by that is, prior to Open Door, I felt like most startups like to sit at the marketplace layer or kind of above that. But that was, it was good that I had that experience because it changed my view of what was possible and what types of problems I could go after. So with Scotty Labs, the original idea, the first real idea that we had, that we ever pitched, was that we were going to build a trucking company. And that happened because my co-founder, Usman and I have similar backgrounds. He moved to the U.S. from Pakistan the same year that I moved here from Nigeria. And we said we wanted to build something in a very traditional space, that touched real people around the country. And trucking was one of the largest industries in the U.S., still is, right? And we decided that we were going to go very deep into the industry, and we were going to build a trucking company because most people wouldn't even attempt to do this, right? Buy a bunch of trucks, really own the problems that exist in the industry, and really try to solve them by building out the tech solutions needed to operate the most efficient trucking company in the world. And then we can also integrate software from other people. So that was the first idea. We went out, we pitched that idea. Nobody was going to give us money to buy trucks. So we said, okay, let's narrow this vision a little bit and focus on one problem. And the problem we had heard, because we went out and talked to a lot of small trucking businesses, and the problems that we kept hearing over and over was it's stuff related to drivers, right? I can't find enough drivers. Drivers are quitting very frequently, all of that stuff. So we thought, well, maybe we should just try to automate this job to some extent, right? And we never believed that. We never believed that autonomy would fully replace the trucking job, and that was never our goal. But we thought that it could improve the quality of life of the driver. The driver would still be in the truck, but the truck can go further. You could have a teleoperator kind of monitoring the truck's movements for certain types of routes and things like that. So that's what we ended up really building at Scotty was we were trying to build a solution for the trucking industry to help with the driving aspect of the job. And on the teleoperation side, especially, so teleoperations is remote operations of a robot, basically. On that end, we had built something that really worked, and a few people knew how well it worked. I mean, it still had a ways to go on commercializing it, but it had really worked. We had customers. We had real revenue, and DoorDash decided to acquire the company. And we just kind of looked into the future, and we said, well, we don't have enough capital to fully solve the problems that we want to solve here. The company would be better off being part of a much bigger company with a lot more capital. And so we decided to sell it to DoorDash.
What is that conversation like between founders when you decide that it's time to sell? Because it's your baby, right? Like you raised this baby and then now somebody else wants to come take care of the baby. And you hadn't ever sold company before. So what was that conversation first with yourself and then with the co-founders?
Yeah, it was tough. It was many conversations. In fact, up until I signed the acquisition docs, I considered walking away so many different times because we were in a very weird position. On the one hand, I try to be a little bit pragmatic about things. So on the one hand, thinking from a pragmatic sense, we just didn't have enough capital. And it was getting harder to raise capital in the autonomous driving space, and it was likely going to get even harder over time. On the other hand, we had built something that had real value, and I quantified real value as people were willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to use the software that we had created. So we knew that we could keep going, but we also knew that the likelihood of really building the quality of stuff that we needed to for something that, if you get it wrong, right, the consequence of making a mistake is potentially loss of life because you're actually operating a machine. So the more we just thought about it, the more it was like, okay, we should probably sell this. I had talked to a lot of different people. People gave me different ways of looking at it. It didn't help that some people said, oh, you should absolutely keep going. And some people said you should absolutely sell the company. But I guess that's how any hard decision goes. There was one moment that probably most determined or gave me the most resolve to sell the company. So I talked to one of our investors. He was an angel investor in the company. Actually, he's David Sachs, who's now general partner at Kraft, which is an investor in CloudTrucks. So I talked to David and I was trying to get his advice. And he gave me this really clear way of thinking about things, right? It's very simple, but it was very clear in that specific moment. So what he asked me was what I wanted to spend my time doing and whether I wanted to spend my time working on something where it was pretty obvious that the capital investment to solve the problem we were trying to solve was probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that meant that the likelihood of us actually solving the problem was low, which meant that we would still sell the company at some point in the future. So the question wasn't about selling the company, really. The question was about, do you want to continue to spend your time on this thing so that you can make more money, like if or when you sell the company in the future? Or do you want to spend your time on something where you can actually win, right? You can fully solve the problem that you set out to solve. And that was what gave me the most resolve because I'm someone who likes to think about how I spend my time and what I'm spending my time on. And, so it's never been about maximizing payout to myself or anything like that. So at that point, it was pretty clear and I decided to sell. There are probably a few more moments along the way where I might have changed my mind, but I think I always went back to that and I felt like that framework was just sound.
I like it. So then let's transition to CloudTrucks. How did the idea of CloudTrucks come about, and was it also similarly related to Scotty Labs as well?
Yeah. So CloudTrucks actually started as I started thinking about it at Scotty in a very specific way. When we had this initial idea of let's go build a trucking company, right? And we started talking to different trucking companies to understand the problems that they faced. The mistake that we made at the time was that we didn't talk to truck drivers enough. So we talked to owners of 5, 10, 15, 20 person trucking companies, but not the actual truck drivers themselves. But over the year, while I was running Scotty, we were exposed a lot more to truck drivers. So we were talking to them all the time. We're trying to get their take on like, what type of technology they would trust and what type of features they needed and all of this stuff, right? So it became clearer and clearer as we talked to them that truck drivers just didn't complain about driving. You know, which is a weird thing because the entire autonomous trucking industry is predicated on this fact that like nobody really wants to be a truck driver because everybody wants to be closer to home. Yeah. Well, consultants are not closer to home, right? They travel all the time and then they come back weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. There are other jobs that keep you away from home. So there's a price at which people are pretty content or even happy being away from home for a week at a time or whatever. So that wasn't the real problem. The problem that a lot of truck drivers faced was that trucking was getting more and more and more complex, and they were getting less and less of the revenue, right? They were getting to keep less and less of the revenue. So there's like compliance stuff, and they would get tickets for many different things, and insurance was getting more expensive, and it's harder and harder to buy a truck, like especially your first truck. And those were all the problems that they faced. So CloudTrucks came out of this idea of like, what if we could build a full business management solution to help these truck drivers? And, and instead of thinking of autonomy as the whole solution, autonomy is actually just one of the spokes, right? It's one of the things that can help them as opposed to being the entire solution, which I think is a flaw in how a lot of autonomous trucking companies talk about their business today. So that's how CloudTrucks came up. Actually, it's called CloudTrucks because during the time when I was thinking about this, I was still at school, of whether we could build some of these solutions inside of Scotty company, but he was quickly out there about what Cloud Kitchens actually did. And it just sounded exact for every single thing on the CloudTrucks platform. So CloudTrucks just enables, we're building more and more and more to enable small trucking businesses, mostly owner-operators. So everything from how they find these opportunities, so they can use the schedule optimizer, but we only give you, the top 100 results, and you can pick which one you want to do. You can book it right there on our app, and then when you complete the job, you go back on that same app again, and you upload your proof of delivery, and you get paid. And it just simplifies everything, and it makes everything consistent. So the driver just has a much better quality of life because they don't have to worry about all of the messiness of managing a trucking business.
Definitely. The three main visions for CloudTrucks payments: less paperwork. Now, I wanted to talk more about the payments angle of it. Did you have any background in payments, and how did those conversations go into fintech, especially with the Stripe and then the visas? How did those initial conversations go?
Yeah, so I don't prior experience in anything that I work on. I'm just someone that's fascinated by specific. So the reason the payments stuff happened, the reason we worked on CT Cash is because we just saw a problem ourselves. So when CloudTrucks started bringing on drivers, so we started bringing on customers in May of we had 2-day payments, just like a lot of people in this should completely solve the problem. You hit Thursday, all of a sudden 2-day payments is now 4 days. Because it's 2 days, it's 2 business days, right? And so your proof of delivery before 5 p.m., then you're going to get paid on Monday. But if you submit it after 5 p.m., would have cash flow issues if they planned on continuing to. I would do a cash app to the driver, and this is every single week. So we were starting to hit the cash app maximum.
Limits,
every week. Yeah. And I went Cash App to Venmo to Zelle. Yeah, we're hitting limits across the board. Now, there are solutions for instant payouts. That's something that exists today, but those solutions all cost money. And we into our margins further by taking on roles. So around this time, Stripe had just announced issuing, right? Their new products issuing. And I thought, this might be an interesting way to solve this problem. And that's really how we started working on it, that team as well. And it's been really great working with both companies so far. So following the problems, every single thing that we launch is, we have some core, like what our customers are looking for, but then we pay attention to signals of like what their actual data. We're just trying to solve those problems, and the way we decide what to work on is not even based on difficulty. It's based on impact, right? So the more impactful a problem would be, or a solution to a problem would be for our customers, the higher up in the priority list that item is going to be for us.
Definitely. So as we round up, I had one last question. This before the podcast started, but what are your thoughts on remote work or the future of remote work? Yeah,
so look, I don't know what the future of remote work is, but I'll say on remote work in general is it's probably here to stay in some form, but I think that today CloudTrucks is not. We're fully remote today, but we plan to be back in office. Primary office is going to continue to be in the Bay Area, in Dallas, and I imagine that in the future we'll have other offices as well where people can go in and meet each other. I think that I like as some that are more like apprenticeship type roles, and some where you can train someone remotely and they can really pick up a task really fast and then kind of get on the way there. So things like engineering, design, I see these roles as very much apprenticeship like in nature. So in order to be a better and better and better engineer, you typically have to, in your early years, work with a senior engineer who is much more experienced and can kind of show you the ropes, so to speak, right? And that the best engineers are formed ultimately is by doing next to other people. So for us, we're trying to maintain that as a core cultural element, where a place where they can come in together, and the more junior folks in the team can learn from more senior folks. Even my views on that will evolve over time, but that's kind of where we are today.
Definitely. So then, what does do in your self-care time? What are your self-care habits?
Yeah, I'm probably going to say something that I've never seen anyone or heard anyone say this in any podcast, but I know they're all lying. I watch a lot of TV. Shut off my brain and watch something on TV and just enjoy a great story. I'm a sucker for great stories, and I really like to. At least for some period of time on the weekends. The other thing, I walk a lot. Like then I'm very likely going on a long walk, and I never plan how long it's going to be. I just noticed later on that I'd been out walking for 3 hours. So I like to do that as well, especially if I've had a really stressful day, and at nighttime I just decide to go for a walk and just think about things while listening to music.
Podcast, maybe.
or a podcast.
I'm more of a walk and listen to podcast type of person. But no, Tobenna, thank you to join us on Afropolitan Podcast. Had a great time, but hopefully you'll be back as well. Maybe after some time, but thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the Afropolitan Podcast. We are building the future of a progressive Black community. To join our community, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Afropolitan. Be sure to join our Discord and Clubhouse community by clicking on the link tree on our Instagram page. See you on social.